I found health insurance fascinating because, first of all, healthcare is so complicated and it's so challenging and it's got so many, I don't know how else to describe them, moral issues. You want a single entity to be able to be accountable for both cost and quality of care and access. Stand back and I say, who am I? What am I doing? Am I living to my potential? Am I doing something that really matters?
Ben Lytle was the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield Indiana and became a central player in forming Anthem, which has become Evolance Health. In this episode, Ben expands on recent healthcare history and provides a vision for where healthcare can and should be headed next.
It's taken an awful long time for that value-based care to actually become how we pay for healthcare.
Ben reflects on his leadership philosophy and why he pursued a career in healthcare.
So it really fired me up, and I found something that I felt like what I did really mattered.
Ben is a potentialist, meaning that living up to his full potential is how he finds purpose in life. He explores how technology and other changes in society will impact what defines success in the future.
Where your success measure is you trying to achieve your own individual potential.
Ben is focused on the future, but let's start with how his story began.
Well, good morning, Ben, and welcome.
Well, thank you, Gary. Glad to be here.
We're pleased to have you at this microphone. Let's dig right in, Ben. You've played such an important role in the evolution of private health insurance in this country as the chairman and CEO of Anthem. Can you give us the backstory of the creation of Anthem, Ben?
In 1987, I had been chief operating officer at that point for 5 years of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Indiana, and I was selected and actually sort of pre-elected by the board to succeed the CEO when he was going to retire 2 years later. And at that point, I asked the board, and they agreed that I wanted to take the next 2 years to develop a strategic plan for the company. I had some freedom there in that 2 years to really investigate how I could make the company stronger. So I set out to figure out how we could diversify the company in case the health plan business wasn't good anymore, wasn't a good business. So I came up with the idea that we would try to merge some Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies that were mutual insurance companies and then take that public. That was not necessarily well received at the time, and we formed Anthem. And the beginning company that I started with, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Indiana, went from that became the Anthem, went from about $1 billion in revenue and about $300 million in surplus, which is sort of a rough equivalent to shareholder equity in a public company. By the end of those 4 mergers, we had close to $10 billion in revenue and over $1 billion in surplus. So we became very strong, very powerful, and we could compete effectively. And then we began to use that surplus to buy struggling Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies in the Northeast and in the West. So we acquired from the states where they operated, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Colorado, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Nevada, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Maine and New Hampshire. And so at the end of that run, we were a very large company, about $16 billion in revenue. And in 2001, we took the company public, and that's the rest is history.
That's just a fascinating story, and your role in this is very interesting. Ben, can we go back a bit? I mean, you were a young person when you went to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Indiana, I think in the information technology space, then became the COO, and then, as you mentioned, the CEO. You must have had a lot of different options than health insurance at the point you joined there. Why did you want to join a company focused on health insurance?
Well, I was fascinated. Initially, I came in as one of the executives in information technology. That was my career. And I had been an information technology in management and information technology in 3 industries: in aerospace, in consumer finance, in banking, and then in health insurance. And I found health insurance fascinating because, first of all, healthcare is so complicated and it's so challenging, and it's got so many, I don't know how else to describe them, moral issues that are involved. You're struggling to try to figure out how do you provide as much care as possible to people and keep it affordable. And there's really nobody else in the industry that quite faces that same challenge. And the government tries to do it, but they don't do it very well. It's government, and so I really felt, boy, this is a unique mission, and it's so challenging to run these businesses well because they're very complicated, very labor intensive, even today with all the technology. So it really fired me up.
What do you think about today, when you look at the huge size of the health insurers today? Did you think that would happen?
Yeah, I actually did. It was precisely why I built Anthem. I could see what was going to happen, how big and powerful the Aetnas of the world and the United Healthcares of the world were going to be, and they were going to be able to access capital in a way that not-for-profits and mutual insurance companies can't. Your only way to raise capital is to raise rates or cut costs, and so I felt that was going to happen, and I think the reason I built Anthem has played itself out.
Ben, some of the companies, United being example, Humana, are moving aggressively into actually acquiring the delivery system, acquiring doctors, home care, and so on and so on. What do you think about that? And did you envision that the health insurers would expand into the delivery system at some point?
Yeah, I did, because I think going back even to the early 90s, we went through a cycle of big health systems acquiring physician practices and other elements of the delivery system, and health plans did it as well. They were a little ahead of the time, because to really make that work, you need value-based care, which was, actually passed and endorsed in Obamacare, or the Accountable Health Act, but it's taken an awful long time for that value-based care to actually become how we pay for health care. Ultimately, I think it's a good thing.
Speaking of the government, we were chatting the other day, just as a run-up to this interview, that if you look at Medicare and Medicaid together, coverage is now roughly 48% of the population. Do you think that's going to continue to grow? And what impact do you think that's going to have on healthcare, Ben?
It is going to continue to grow. I don't see any way it doesn't. First of all, we have an aging population. So we're going to have more people in Medicare and Medicaid. And in Medicaid, of course, being the elderly who can't afford, who really can't afford even private supplemental insurance, and what they call a dual eligible, somebody who's eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid. So that's going to grow, though the elderly are consuming more care per capita, because we're figuring out more ways to keep people living longer and living better. That's a good thing. In addition to the Medicaid rolls are going to continue to grow, because as healthcare, we haven't been very successful in making the cost of healthcare any cheaper, for sure. It gets more expensive every year, and the cost of health insurance. And so it becomes more unaffordable to more people. So the Medicaid rolls grow and the Medicare rolls grow. I believe unless we fundamentally solve a few problems in healthcare financing, we're going to end up with a real crisis, a cost and access crisis in healthcare.
Yeah, that's for sure the case. Affordability is a term that a lot of us use for what you're talking about, and that seems to be growing as a issue. We'll discuss your book, The Potentialist, a little bit later, but the framework on that really is a 30-year framework. And if I could apply that to this situation, are you positive, Ben, that we can actually evolve to a more value-based care, take care of this growing population of chronic disease? Do you think in the context of the next 10, 20, 30 years that we'll actually solve this problem?
We're going to have to build a more value-based care system to get there. But hopefully that's going to take place in the next decade or so. And I think, and unfortunately, a lot of times necessity is the mother of invention, and we have to get to a crisis before we do something. But I hope we don't get that far.
Ben, you have a brand of leadership that's kind of been you throughout your career. How do you integrate that brand of leadership into these companies like Anthem that you either found or run? How do you think about that, Ben?
Well, and this is going to sound overly simple, but I fundamentally enjoy people. I like being around people. There are people and people in leadership who find people annoying, and they're always, they are troublesome, they're challenging, but I find leading people to be fun and inspiring, and I like the people I work with. I mean, I try to relate to the people I work with as I do anybody else, and not put myself on a pedestal, but that I'm just one of them trying to make a good living and do a good job at what I do. And people seem to respond well to that.
You mentioned your interest in healthcare back when you joined Blue Cross Blue Shield, but has healthcare been a good place for your entrepreneurial interests, Ben?
Yeah, and I think it is for the future for many people because, again, it's essential, it's complicated, and there's so much that needs to be done to make it better and to modernize it. We shouldn't accept that healthcare is going to always be inflationary. We shouldn't accept that. We should have the attitude more like tech companies that next year we're going to give you twice as much for less. And that's a big stretch for healthcare, but we don't have that thinking, and we need to. And so it's a great field for entrepreneurs because there are so many places where you can create value, and that's what an entrepreneur is all about.
For the entrepreneurs in the audience, can you share with us, generally speaking, what areas of healthcare do represent good entrepreneurial opportunities?
Well, there's a lot, but a few right off the bat is that people are now really seeing something that demographers have known for 25 years, which is that we're now producing fewer people. We are actually we have the birth rates have fallen worldwide, and they've really fallen in developed countries, and we're just we don't have as many young people, and one of that creates a challenge, but also an opportunity. We don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, and that problem is going to get worse before it gets better. So technology and other solutions that can cause us to be able to have one doctor see more patients, have one nurse influence more patients and help patients. Anything that improves that productivity is huge.
Yeah, well, that's super. Why don't we turn to your new book, The Potentialist? You envision this as actually the first in a three-part series. So what led you to think about a series, Ben?
Every year, right after the first of the year, I take a few days over a couple of weeks, and I just look at my life. I stand back and I say, who I am? Who am I? What am I doing? Am I living to my potential? Am I doing something that really matters to the people, for the people I love, and for other people as well? And that's me and I wanted to bring out the best in the people that I led in management and my family and others, help them become their best. And then the other thing I became very interested in my early 20s was the futurists and the science fiction writers, because as being a potentialist looks at the individual's potential, science fiction writers and futurists to me look at the potential for humanity. So to me, they were one and the same. So anyway, as a result of that, I've always followed the latest thinking on the future. And so around 2014, it hit me that the vast majority of the people in the United States and the world, for that matter, have no idea what's coming. And what's coming is going to completely change how we work, the lifestyles we live, and even what we are as a human being. All that's going to change as a result of a series of converging factors, demography, and particularly technology and medical science. That convergence is going to create an entirely new world. So I thought, I've got 3 adult children, very smart, successful people, and I've got 8 grandchildren, and I've got to make sure they get it, where we're going, and what they need to do differently. And so as I started working with people in the publishing industry, they said, several of them said, people who are authors and publishers and so forth, they said, Mr. Lytle, this is really good stuff. Nobody's writing specifically about what you ought to do to get ready for the future. They write about the future, but not how it's going to affect us. You ought to publish this. So that's what led me to the 3-book series.
It's an interesting idea and certainly a very interesting book. Now, the new reality piece of this is really important. And there, you've defined health, wealth, and success as being 3 keys of this new reality. Can you work us through that, Ben, and basically how you arrived at that, and each of those 3 keys, health, wealth, and success? How do you think about that?
I don't think we've done real well, quite frankly, on those 3. We, as a general rule, we haven't done what we can individually to optimize our health and live a healthy life. If you look at savings rates in the United States, then the number of people and the amount of people who don't have enough saved to retire or live in their later years, much less pay for increasing costs of healthcare, we haven't really done what we need to do. And on the success side, we've unfortunately let fame, money, power, and appearance become the measures of success. And that really isn't what success is. So I thought, well, that was a big problem. I mean, it's already a problem. Now look into the future, and people are going to live longer. They're going to live 10, 20, 30 years longer. Well, if you don't, how are you going to finance those extra years? How are you going to, if you have to work, because, it's pretty clear that retirement's not going to be the same as it is today. You're going to live longer. You're going to have to work longer. So how are you going to have the health to do that? How are you going to finance those extra years? And since money, fame, power, appearance are all transitory over a longer life, you can't use that as the measure of success. So that's what the book is about, is first of all trying to raise awareness. You need to be thinking about living longer, and how are you going to do that? because nobody's going to do it for you. Nobody's in Washington's thinking about how they're going to help you do this, and they're not going to. It's up to you. And then think about living your life where your success measure is you trying to achieve your own individual potential. So I've tried to create a practical way for how do you do that, which in the book I call optimal health, optimal wealth, and optimal success. And so that's become a real passion of mine, obviously. You can tell by the way I'm talking about it.
Well, it's an excellent book. I advise everybody to read it, and it's a good, engaging read. Ben, this has been just a terrific interview. We appreciate your being with us today. I have one final question, if I could, and that is for the up-and-coming leaders in our audience. What advice would you have for them, particularly up-and-coming healthcare leaders? What advice would you have for them?
We're entering an age because of our convergence with technology, where we're going to become basically seamless with technology, where it's almost hard to tell where the human being stops and the technology begins, and vice versa. And if anyone really doubts that statement, ask yourself, how different are you now than you are before you had a smartphone? There's the perfect example. That's the beginning. So what are you going to do with all that increased power and capability? What are you going to do with it? You can make the world a better place, or you can make it a worse place. And so for leaders and entrepreneurs, I would say go at the world to make it better seriously, because the one thing about this convergence between us and technology is that we can make the impossible possible. So I hope to live long enough and to contribute through my own entrepreneurial activities and investments, making what sounded impossible possible. So we can have a healthier society. We can afford our aging population and to give them a good life if we go at it right. So I would say think big, think aggressive, and be very action oriented as you try to make the world a better place and live to your potential.
Well, it's terrific advice, and it's actually a terrific model of your career, Ben. Thank you very much for being with us today. It's been our pleasure.
Thank you, Gary. I enjoyed it.